Hello, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours. On behalf of everybody who's involved in the show, this is the place we answer your tech questions live 7 days a week, and we're going to dive right into those questions. Our reader today is Courtney Gooden in Hollywood. Courtney, what do we have on tap for today?
Thank you, Bill. First up from Austin, Texas, Paul Wallace asks, what are the steps to connect an Insta360 Link controller to your iPhone or Android phone?
Alex, do you have a thought for him?
I didn't know you could.
So there may be no steps.
I think the steps start to shrug. So I didn't know that you could actually do that. So if we see steps that allow us to do that, let me know. But I don't think that we can. I don't think we can connect webcams to a.
On the new ones with the class-compliant USB-C port, is there any way you can think of to get the Link controller?
I mean, plug it in and see if Facebook sees it, but I don't think it will. Like, I just don't think it'll work. So,
Nope.
Yeah. So I don't think that's possible.
Without further testing, the answer is no. We'll see if somebody comes up with it. If you're out there and you have this configuration, give it a shot and let us know what your response is. Courtney.
Well, I was just perusing the specs, and I see that it's 5 volts, 1 amp that it needs. It needs an amp of power, and normally the USB-C is a little bit higher, but normal USB-A type connections, which it goes into primarily since it's 5 volts, is usually 500 milliamps. So it may pull too much power to run those servos than you can get out of your Android phone or maybe your iPhone.
Okay. Alex, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, a quick note that's unconnected. If you are watching the show today, you may find it in HDR if you're on an iPhone or an iPad or an HDR display. We look great. This is probably our best HDR so far. Yeah, we look amazing. Anyway, so
Alex forgot to comb his hair.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I didn't even comb my hair, and how did this happen? So anyway, the color looks great. If you're an SDR, just to know, we look very bright. We know we look very bright, but the only way to fix this is to go ahead and go live, allow people on the back end to look at it, and so we're going live with it so that it can be an example of what needs to get fixed. But anyway, that's why. So if we look very bright on your SDR display, we know that that's the case. You don't have to tell us in the chat. so anyway, but if you're watching in HDR, let us know what you think of it. All right.
Yeah, if you haven't been here for a couple of days, Alex has put us in innovation and experiment mode, and we're doing only the first hour for the course of the next few weeks to try to dial in all these various technical things, so bear with us. Next question.
Next one comes in from Pedro G. Gonzalez III in Oklahoma City. He says, have you signed up for 20% off the new Mac Mini M4 stand and hub from Satechi?
And there's a link there to their new product. I guess they were probably, they're out pretty fast here. Alex, have you heard about this one?
I have, and I have not signed up for it. And here's why. I bought 2 of those in the past, and the real challenge was that one of them, the drive kept on appearing and disappearing on my computer like every couple seconds until I had to unplug it. And so I didn't find them to be, I was 1 out of 2. so I decided that these and the way I use my Mac Minis changed as well. So I decided that I wasn't going to keep moving forward with those. So, but that's why I haven't bought it, is because that one was very unstable, and I probably should have sent it back. It was one of those things that you buy it and then it sat for a while I waited to figure out where I was going to put it. And then by the time it was there, it was out of the return policy, but it didn't work at all. And so it feels a little, I feel like the build quality isn't what I'd like it to be either. So I just kind of moved on from those hubs.
Fair enough. Next question.
Next one came in from the QR code. Rafael Sayed in Toronto says, hi, folks. How can I get live poll results from YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram displayed as graphics in vMix? Thanks.
Alex, do you have
good luck? Good luck.
This is the second, yeah.
So there are some tools there are some larger tools like Restream and StreamYard that they work out all the APIs and everything else, but there's no real easy way to get this data on a regular basis. The problem really is that Facebook and Instagram, I don't know if there's any way to get the data there. There might be some way to get some of it, I think, but it's again larger partner issues that I haven't seen anybody build a data path for that. So I think StreamYard and Restream can get Instagram. I haven't seen a lot of smaller folks get a hold of Instagram. Getting into the graph inside of Facebook, it's just that it's constantly changing. So you got to know that it's not a one and done. This is, I'm going to tweak it every week kind of thing. And so just know that Facebook is just kind of a cluster when it comes to that. And then YouTube has a token system that is really painful. So again, if for larger organizations that are doing things like again StreamYard and Restream, you can get some of those things, but it's usually integrated into their platform. I don't know of anyone that's taking that data and delivering it. Maybe Guy does. But the token system was so painful on YouTube, we just gave up. And so that's why there's no comments on our show. I don't just send everybody to Makana because I was just tired of trying to integrate with any of these platforms. They've all been pretty painful.
Guy Cochran, thoughts?
Yeah, in vMix, there's something called ad browser input. So you can use any of the popular HTML5 graphics generators, something like Flowix from Viz will do the trick. So Slidio, there's a couple of different ones that you can go and create the pull and then push it into vMix through the ad browser input. And all ad browser input does is put those graphics as transparent over the top, if you want them as transparent, but it's HTML5, so you can't have those things pop up over the top of your video and place them as any other layer or anything else that you would like to integrate into your show.
Am I misreading, though? It seems like he wants to try to aggregate poll results from various sites into a single thing and concatenate them all and then push them out as an overall. That seems like it would be way more complicated if I'm reading that right. And I might not be. Alex, you wanted to get back in on this? Yeah.
I think that what he's trying to do is get the data from there. And what I'm saying, you can't get the data from there. You can definitely there's a lot of HTML5 solutions, and if you want to pull something, but I think that what he's trying to do is get the results. That's my guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how, and that's the part that is from getting the raw results from these platforms is not a trivial problem, I think.
If they're big numbers, is there any kind of OCR reader in the back end that could read the screen? And could you set up 3 Mac Minis or something like that and read the numbers? That would be really hard, right?
I mean, it's the number. Yeah, there's probably. It's just that it's really painful. It's really. It's not that there's no easy way to do it. Again, you can get some of this data. Larger organizations that have a team that can sit there and mess with the way that those things happen but you have to have somebody who's dedicated to it all the time. It's just going to be a constant problem. As someone who did it for a while, I just gave up. I was just I can't keep keeping up with these platforms and how they build those. And I think that they just don't want you to do it. They have an API, and I don't know if they really want people to be grabbing the data out of the platform. So
makes sense. Next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, would the panel still recommend the HuddleCam HD Pro for a monitored top camera with an HDMI output, or would there be easier options available? This is at HuddleCam.com. He has a link.
Guy Cochran, help us out.
I think he said better options available, and absolutely there's better options available now. The HuddleCam's getting a little long in the tooth is what it looks like. The interesting thing when it first came out was that it was one of the only webcams that I know of that had a dedicated HDMI out, as Douglas alludes to there. The other nice thing about this camera is, as opposed to other ones, in the box comes the remote, so you can set up, actually being able to just zoom in and frame up a shot is pretty amazing. So it's one of the few cameras for, I think it's under $200 now. So bang for buck, a 4K camera, HDMI out with the ability to zoom is a pretty good deal. But the picture quality of the Insta360 line, now that these cameras, there's even a newer Insta360 that doesn't have the pan ability, which is less expensive. If you just want raw image quality for something that's going on top of a monitor and you don't need the ability to pan, I'd definitely be looking at the Insta360 Link instead. And then it just goes up the ladder from there. Of course, we want things that have larger sensors, so it just comes down to image quality. What do you need? How good is good enough?
Excellent point. Next question.
Next question is from Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. And Alex asks, has anyone tried, sorry, 1 second here. Just have a little, can you read that?
Sure. Has anyone tried Steer Mouse? And that's STEER mouse. It was recommended a little while ago on MacBreak Weekly and looks like a useful utility for customizing buttons. And he's got a link there to it. Alex?
Yeah, the Steer Mouse it does look, a lot of the software has been pretty clunky. And so it is, the Steer Mouse, I think, does make looks like it makes it better. I'm going to give it a test. I downloaded it and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, fair enough. Next question. And
next one's coming in from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul asks, Sony Alpha 1 2 just launched. What will be the main features? He's got a link there, and it looks like it's for the second generation flagship Alpha 1 2.
Yeah, Jesse's going to help us out in a second, but I looked on their website today, and it's really interesting. They have all sorts of different ways to typeset this Alpha 1, and they have Roman numeral II, they have small II, they have 2 with brackets over it. It's very odd. So I guess this is the Alpha 1 2 that was just released.
Hey, Carlita?
Jesse? What do you think?
Carlita!
Believe we have an open mic. Anyway, yes, of course there will be some branding issues when you're dealing with as many cameras as Sony releases. There are going to be errors along the way on their copy. But let's get into the actual camera. So this is the Sony Alpha 1 Mark II, and just so you know what you're getting into with this, as I understand, it's the exact same sensor. It's the exact same image processing for both video and photo. What they've added is a chip for AI, which is not nothing on Sony. Like their cameras are very software driven, so anything to push the software forward will be will mean a lot in a Sony camera. But if you use your Sonys, like you use a Pentax K1000 or something, you probably won't notice much difference between the Mark I and the Mark II. And just to give you an idea of where we're at with pricing, the Mark I on B&H is currently discounted by $1,000 to differentiate it from the Mark II, which is the exact same price. So it would be a tough upgrade if you're an A1 user to jump into the A2, but if you're just jumping into the Alpha series and you want to jump in at the top level, you might as well jump in on the A1 Mark II mirrorless camera.
Yeah, interesting. I was just checking, and I saw that the retail price is up there around $6,500. That's a pretty heavy lift to try to figure that out. Looks like it has a lot of great features, and Sony's making a big rush on it. But yeah, that's going to be an interesting lift for that class of cameras. I mean, basically the DSLR form factor, which has been hugely popular, don't get me wrong, but there's so many now choices. If you're shooting a lot of video that just do video, it'd be great to have the stills capability. But I don't know if I'm willing to invest that kind of money in a full-frame mirrorless and then have to buy lenses for it as well. I guess if you're really heavily into the ecosystem of Sony lenses or those Micro Four Thirds lenses, then it probably would make a lot of sense.
$7,000 feels like the edge of what I think people would accept for a hybrid DSLR. I can't imagine I don't even think there's a huge market up there. Like $3,000-$4,000 is already kind of pushing the edge in my mind for a hybrid DSLR.
Yeah, I think so too. There's so many video kind of, and then stills are migrating so fast into computational photography with the iPhones and things like that. It's an amazing thing. So there will be people, photojournalists and things like that, who want the ultimate still camera that also does video, but I don't know how many of them there are out there. It'll be interesting to see how well this does. Let's slip into our next question.
Next one's coming in from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas asks, has anyone had any experience with the Zaor furniture range, thinking of the Miza Z Flex? And he's got a link there to the product.
Yeah, I think I saw this question yesterday when it came up, so I took a look at it. It looks like a pretty solidly built thing. The thing I always ask whenever I'm looking at studio furniture, there are a couple of things. Number one, I want to make sure it was designed for a studio, and my key for that is whether it has wiring harnesses or troughs or something like that built into the desk such that you don't have to literally tack down every wire behind it. And this one did. So I was happy to see that. As I recall, it's somewhere between, it's covering around a $2,000 desk, that Miza Z Flex. And that is not an unreasonable price for a dedicated piece of production furniture. What you will find in that kind of, at that level of desk is something that's built out of usually pretty heavy duty, I won't say wood because often these are some form of high-density pressed wood product, but they can be finished really nicely. And the advantage of that is things like MDF, which a lot of furniture is built out of these days. It doesn't warp. It's a little bit resistant to warp unless it gets really saturated with moisture. But it's thick and it's heavy, which for our kind of work, when you often have a microphone attached to it or something like that, it's nice to know that you can tap things and you don't have the whole desk resonating into a microphone. Also, a lot of us have a lot of things clamped onto the edges of these kind of studio desks, and that extra beefiness can be really useful to this. I also saw that this one has some sort of a kind of a slide in and out mid desk. So for a smaller studio, that might be a comfortable thing. With my old mid-Atlantic desk that I have here, I think it's like 6 feet wide, but it's also about 6 feet deep because the meter bridge where I keep my monitors and my prompter and things like that is almost as big as the desk part outside. Mine is plumbed for rack units to be installed in it, which is something that I didn't see on this one. But, we're using less equipment, and I think these purpose-built production desks, if you're going to be doing this all the time, Douglas, then I'm kind of a fan of them. I bought this once, cried once over it when I bought it back 25 years ago, but I'm still using it to this day, and there's not one moment that it's failed me in the course of those 30 years. So, Guy Cochran, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, this is where going to these trade shows is really just comes in handy. I mean, NAMM's coming up in January, so is CES. We've seen some just fantastic desks at CES. The worst thing is to buy something like this mail order and have it show up, and then it just doesn't fit what you need, and then you got to disassemble it and ship it back. So going to these trade shows can be a boon. So we got NAMM coming up, we got CES, and of course there's NAB, but there's nothing like a local provider if you do live in a bigger city where you can go in there and actually sit and try it out. Because I've bought some and acquired some large pieces of furniture that they seem like they were perfect, but now I have MSNBC's old editing desk in my garage right now, just because the angle isn't quite right of the 19-inch rack that I want for what I would put in it, which is some Ethernet switches and Ubiquiti stuff that I want to, that's sitting over here in a pile. And so you got to make sure that you get those angles right for your line of sight, for your hand reach, because a lot of the stuff you want to reach for by muscle memory. So it is that buy once, cry once, as Bill was saying.
Yeah, and I would even take a look at the configuration of it and then take a look at, maybe I used to cut out little pieces of paper and say, this is this patch bay and this is this thing, and figure out where they will all fit. In your case, I can't remember whether you have like keyboards and things like that, but individuals have different needs. And if you want to put a keyboard on a desk, it's going to take up a lot of real estate. Then your question is, should I really get the wider one to give me room to do other things other than just play? Or is this going to be a more dedicated for a single set of functions thing? So I support everything the guy says. I bought this Middle Atlantic monster that I've carried with me through my entire career after going to NAB and literally sitting down at it and decide in my office, oh, this is nice. The outboard equipment rack, which is silenced and has fans on the back of it, I can use that this way. And I asked the guy, can I switch the desk to the other direction if I move? And he said yes, and showed me how to disassemble it and move it so that it was a left-mounted desk return rather than a right. And I've done that twice over the course of the 30 years I've owned it. So those kind of things, it's really great to be able to see it in person. Let's go to the next question.
Next one's coming in from Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. And Chester asks, I was about to update my Final Cut Pro on my M2 Mac Mini. Will I have regrets? Or should I keep going forward because it's fine? I don't often use or have to rely on Final Cut for jobs or missions.
Jesse Kester, what do you think?
I think if you're not relying on the editing software for something mission critical, you might be more qualified than the panelists to make that leap and tell us how it goes.
Are you talking about updating the program to the new version or updating your laptop, and I only ask that because there's a lot of discussion on the boards right now because the M4s just came out, and a lot of people are asking the question, should I stick with an M2 or will I get a big boost to the M4? And I'm hearing more and more from people that unless there's a specific thing you want to do, while each of them is definitely faster, and for certain things like heavy renders or massive processing things, if you're doing, massive multicam or something like that, you will get performance boosts out of going up the chip hierarchy. But for generic operation day-to-day, standard video editing, you're just editing 1920, 1080, or even ultra high definition or something like that, unless you've got lots of layers, you're not going to see a big jump in productivity. So you really do have to analyze what you're trying to do and match that against the capabilities of the computer. And in a lot of these discussions, it's people who bought into M1s when they first came out, people like me who bought into the M2 series after waiting it for 2. I've skipped M3. I'm seriously thinking about skipping the M4 chips. I know I will get a few extra things out of that, but for the day-to-day productivity editing that I do, this is so crazy faster than anything I've ever had before that I don't see any real compelling reason to change. Now, that's me personal. Your mileage definitely may vary. Guy Cochran, your thoughts?
Yeah, I went and got the M4 just base model Mac Mini, and just for testing. And one of the golden rules has always been don't upgrade in the middle of a project. Well, what I did was I left a project on another drive, and when I upgraded that, I copied it, and when I upgraded it, I quickly ran out of storage space because I bought the bare minimum one because I downloaded that Apple Intelligence for the captions. So be aware that it doesn't just come with new features and it's faster. It comes with more storage requirements. So if you get the base machine, you may quickly be having this pop-up that says you're out of space. One of the things that I also like to do is Mac Stadium. You can get a base Mac Mini for about $109 a month. So if there's things that you want to test, I mean, $109 to not blow up your workflow and test something in a sealed off environment. There are machines like an Ultra. We were renting one that was $549 a month. So you can go all the way up the ladder to some of the fastest stuff that they have available. The M4s, if they're not already in Mac Stadium, they should be there soon. And there's another outfit, I don't recall the name off the top of my head, that also has them. But think about cloud, because then you could just literally say I'm done, and you don't have to go to the Apple Store or anything. You just, you just turn it off in the cloud and it walk away. You're done. So you can blow stuff up and then not mess up anything on your local machines.
Yeah, I have to say, last night, leaving my office, I thought, I really should update the operating system on my old iPad that I use next to me for doing this kind of thing. That's what's feeding a separate signal into my production system here. And I couldn't, just because I had bought this originally as a mostly working on scripts machine, I didn't get a lot of RAM in it, and I probably should have gotten more back then because I ran into that we can't update because you don't have enough free space on it. So, I'm a great believer that almost every machine I have is in the class of I've just below maybe a step, maybe 2 steps below the max memory I can get, because that's always been a problem of running out just because I have so many things going on. But pay attention. I wasn't able to upgrade to the new operating system on my iPad until I was able to turn off and or delete all of the applications that were not mission critical, just to give it enough room to run the update cycle. It was asking for, I think, 3 gigabytes that I didn't have in terms of overhead. And so I had to get rid of a bunch of stuff to do that. It was more of a pain in the butt than I wanted to deal with, but I got it done last night. Guy?
Yeah, that captioning feature alone is probably worth the upgrade. So if you do see yourself using that feature, it's pretty dang cool.
Yeah, this is the direction it's going. At some point or another, they're going to come out with a feature and go, okay, I got to have that. I got to switch whatever I need to switch, get a new machine or whatever. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul asks, explained mix minus.
In 25 words or less, and why? Jesse Kester is going to start us off. Jesse?
So usually when you're doing a mix, you're adding and adding and adding and adding, and then that goes out to the room. You start with your drums, and then you add your keys, and you add your vocals, and your guitars, and your bass, and all that stuff. A mix minus is when you kind of take that final mix that's going out to the room and you slice things off of it. So you remove components, and this is really, really useful for sending to the in-ear monitors for different people on the stage. So maybe the bass player wants guitar, kick drum, and no vocals whatsoever. You would feed them the mix minus everything they don't want. So that's the overview of a mix minus.
And yeah, we use it on this show, and you can understand this. We have a bunch of people in a panel here. We're all talking live into the central server, and we're trying to keep latency to a minimum. In the circumstance where I turn on my microphone, what I do not want to have happen is the signal from my microphone plus what was sent to the show, and I'm monitoring the show in real time, because then suddenly there's two of me, one of which is delayed, and that is a nightmare in terms of being able to perform when you hear yourself coming back later. So in a mix minus, every person sending to office hours to be on the panel will be getting a return feed that is everybody minus themselves, so that you can monitor yourself in real time cleanly with one source, but you are not hearing a fold back of what you have sent to the show, because that's what you need from everybody else. We all want to hear everyone, but only one version of ourselves, not program and preview feeds of yourself, because that is a nightmare to work under those conditions. So that's basically what mix minus does. Next question.
All righty. Douglas Carmichael, I'm back. Sorry, had a little brief
Good to have you back.
Interruption back there. Douglas Carmichael says, has anyone had experience with the OBSBOT USB camera to HDMI adapter? And he has a link there.
Guy Cochran, can you help out?
Yeah, sure. I have not only that one, which is the OBSBOT, but that's little competitor, which is the Tau Mini. And what some people don't realize that these things could do is not just use them for cameras. Like you could take a Insta360 Link and you can get an HDMI out. You are going to get latency, so be aware that you're going to get about 6 frames of latency. One of the cool things about these, though, is that if you have an ATEM, especially an ATEM Extreme, and you need to pop another monitor out, like let's say, for instance, you want multi-view, you can send the UVC out of USB 2, for instance, and have a multi-viewer, plus you could have program going somewhere. So they do come in handy, and they're like $159. Be aware that there is a little USB on the back, and that is to control. If you use their remote control, it doesn't work with everybody's stuff. So basically, when you buy the remote control, you get a little USB dongle that goes into that slot, and then now you can control only their cameras. So I have the OBSBOT version with the OBSBOT remote to control OBSBOT's cameras. So be aware that is just for it does not work with other cameras. I've tried it, and I was bummed that it does not work. It's not a standard protocol that makes it pass through.
Thank you for helping Douglas avoid another problem. That's what we do here every day, all day long, is hopefully have faced these things before so we know how to help other people not have to face them. Next question.
Next one comes in from Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. Alexander Knight asks, I've heard that the built-in network interface card on the Mac Mini, I guess it's the original Mac Mini, is not reliable for Dante, but I haven't been able to find out why it's inadequate. Seems strange that Apple would cut corners in this area. Is the NIC on the OWC Thunderbolt dock stable for Dante?
And Alexander, he's not in today. For some reason, I know he was here last week. I haven't heard a lot of that on the webs. Now, I don't normally monitor the threads that talk about Dante because I don't use it except for here on the show for our comm system, so it's not a part of my regular practice. But I'm surprised because normally if there was something that is as important as that something is not working on all the Mac Minis universal with a product like Dante that is so well used, usually you see a flurry and there's a lot of talk and those things get voted up because a lot of people are using these systems. And so I always just wonder, is that something that you're seeing based on your configuration, Alexander, or is it something that is endemic across the system. I'm not saying it's not. There may be something about that. Could be something that Apple has done. It could be something that the Dante folks haven't addressed, that either they are or are not compliant with Apple's developer guidelines for how they implemented it. So we need more information. Courtney, you have some thoughts on it?
I was just thinking, to troubleshoot it, try using, if you have a USB 3, USB-C to network, Ethernet connector.
Thank you.
Try that and see if the clocking is stable there. It may be that if it's going through the USB bus, that the polling of the USB is not compatible with the regular clock of Dante, so it may have problems with clocking dropout.
And Guy.
Yeah, I always wind up using these little pluggable USB dongles on all my machines for NDI and for Dante. Mickey in the chat does say, Alexander Knight, the NICs built into Macs have extremely high jitter and loses its PTP clock. I use NICs built into OWC docks all the time. You can also use a hardware Dante interface instead of DVS.
Okay, so maybe that's what's going on. Mickey is very highly experienced, so he may have found some of the flaw there that needs to be addressed. Next question.
Next one comes in from Tromsø, Norway, and Ronnie Hofsey asked, what do you think about big bands releasing camera products in a new package, but repurposing older parts with subpar specs, compensating for the bad performance with modern processing, just like the Sony Z200 as an example?
Interesting. Jesse, have you heard of this?
We hear it a lot on this show. Trust arrives on foot and leaves on horseback. If you're getting a whole bunch of bad components and then repurposing them and they're underpowered and they don't deliver and you just keep selling them to the customer base, eventually the customer base will, drift away to a company that they might trust a little bit more. The cousin of this is, like buying cheap components and putting them in a case and then spray painting your logo on the case and then charging 10 times what that original cheap component was worth. And business practices like that have us seeing red.
Courtney Gooden.
Sorry, I said big brands, big bands, not big brands. But anyway, what may have happened here is, remember there was a period of supply line interruption last year or earlier this year. So it could be that if they're using suppliers for some of those external parts, that they couldn't get them because of supply line interruptions. So they may have had to, think fast and change their manufacturing and use parts that they still have on the shelf from the previous year's model to be able to continue to ship product. So that may have been what happened is supply side interruption.
Yeah, that was a big deal for a long time after those fires on the Pacific Rim took out so much capacity for specific chips. Let's go to the next question.
From Trinidad and the West Indies, Rian Smith. What would 1080p PTZ optics type cameras do well for recording interviews? Or do I really need more specific DSLR recorded video type cameras to have video grade capture?
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, I used to teach video production long time ago with the little Canon GL2s, and one of the things that we would say is get the camera further back and zoom in, because the sensor's so tiny that to get the shallow depth of field that makes it look like a more filmic type camera, you really want to blur that background. And so if you are going to use a small sensor type camera, my recommendation would be to get that thing across the room and then zoom in, and that'll give you, and then use an aperture like a 2.8 if it'll do it, or I think that one might max out at 3.5 or something like that. But they can be good. It comes down to lighting. You got to make sure these cameras do their best with good lighting. So can you make it look like a full frame Sony, $4,000 or $1,000 camera or $7,000 camera we were talking about earlier? Probably not. It comes down to the optics, the lens, and the sensor, and then all the ability to store all that color information. So it also comes down to how are you storing and capturing this, because that camera has NDI out. I wouldn't use the NDI HX if you want the full color fidelity of that camera. I would take the SDI or the HDMI one and record it in 10-bit, something that I could then still have some leeway in post to pull and stretch that color around.
I was going to weigh in on this, but all I'll say is what Guy said. Next question.
Dan Goldstein in Westchester, New York, says, if you were designing your own bespoke project management tool, what items would you include on a dashboard view, and how in-depth would you get?
Harshid Trivedi's going to start us off here. Harshid?
Yeah, so for me personally, if it's a bespoke program and you're trying to serve your work or employment or what have you, I think one piece for me personally is having it accessible. So I use a screen reader called JAWS, Job Access with Speech. There's an NVDA, non-visual desktop access. Apple uses VoiceOver. Then we have Narrator from Microsoft. So certain products or projects, if you get thrown into it, we want to have everybody be able to work on a project. So some of the key implementations would be like having lists and tables and stuff. But if you're using such things, to have them labeled properly and then to be able to access them easily. So if you have a bunch of drop downs, that might work for you or might get complicated. So you want to make sure your performance on your job site is not impacted by, let's say, an inaccessible piece of your software. So there are many things to think about, but when you are programming or developing, how do you use maybe a button versus a list versus a link versus something with a graphical interface like a picture, right? And you might be able to click on a graphical piece to say customer info, or to say this is information, business information. So if you're trying to look at databases of vendors and you're trying to find something specific, you want to be able to access a interface that would work on all accountability, because again, vision is one of those things. It's not age-related. You could have a kid that's blind. You could have an elderly person that's blind. And sometimes we just we have the knowledge in our brains, but how do we keep putting our best foot forward, so to speak, or maybe how can we fail forward rather than backwards with, oh, this doesn't work and I can't do project management because of this thing doesn't work. So just remember, when you are making products, and if it is especially bespoke, you want it for everybody. So universal design is a huge key component to that piece.
Jesse Kester.
So if we could build our own bespoke project management tools from the ground up, the things that would be at the front of our mind for each project would be priority, schedule, team involved, gear involved, and specific client concerns or considerations. And when you get into like that kind of complexity of data, what's on my mind is that you'd have to have a lot of precision and ease of navigation in menu trees, or like data trees of. So if we want to look at a project's gear list, we'd want that to have a tree that would be camera department, lighting department, sound department, tying all that together, live stream or not live stream. How are we connecting it all? And all that we'd want it to be dropping down in trees so that we could easily take a look, and then it would easily disappear and clear out the screen really quickly for the crew who's in which department. Again, you're starting to see like a lot of trees unfold in real time as you think about the camera team, the lighting team, the sound team. But really, like project management, that half of it is the things and the people that we're stacking up for those days of filming. But even more important than that to us is, like what the client needs are and how we handle that client. So having quick access to what level of priority we consider this project, what the schedule is of this project, being able to have all the projects in this cloud aggregate by priority or by schedule or by the crew that we're going to be working with, stuff like that would be really cool. So to have it more as like a cloud nodal thing than a spreadsheet or like a bento menu box, would kind of be where we'd want to start the conversation and continue it for 3 to 6 months as we sketch things out and discuss how the navigation would go.
The only thing I'll add to that is hopefully either you are or have access to a really good project manager. And here's what I'm talking about in terms of that. Every time I sat in the boardroom, as I got into bigger companies, and we had a proposal for a video, and it would start in, let's say, ops. The operations department is going to be the owner of this thing. And so we are going to put these messages in the video we're creating for them. Then somebody at some point would say, well, let's get sales and let's get facilities and let's get all these other people in. And universally, what they wanted was not on the list of what ops had wanted. And so you started to get this incredible growing project where everybody wanted their needs taken care of in addition to the original project owners' things. And it got very political very fast because those aren't the same things necessarily. What I learned about that is having somebody who's on the liaison staff with the corporate people who can say, look, this is being paid out of the budget from these guys. These guys get what they want. Things that come up after that from the other departments would be nice, particularly if they can be implemented easily. But we're not going to slow down the over thing for all these constituencies. So to me, it always seemed like the devil was in the details. Whoever's got that token and saying you're in charge is going to drive the features and what they want. And even if it's just you doing your own project management tool, you will do it for what you need and for what you know you need. But there's no sin in the fact that you will not know what other constituents might want or might benefit the program unless you go out and survey them and find out in what way are their needs different than mine and how can I accommodate those? So software design and project management, things like this, not an easy task. And my hat's off to all of you who work in this space. Jesse, you wanted to come back in?
I'd love to. You said you should have a project manager on your team. I think you should have as many project managers in this conversation as possible because project management is really tethered to the DNA of the person who's doing it. So if you talk to like 1 people or 5 people, you're going to get a really wrong answer, because it won't apply to the 10,000 other people who are managing projects. So you want to talk to as broad a swath of people as you can. And I think what will be revealed is that the software's primary function is to be customizable to the user, not to organize things in one straight line.
Yeah. Interesting question. Thank you, Dan, for it. Next question.
Next question comes in from Josh Lynch in Burbank. I'm in the market for a new office chair in my studio. I've owned Aeron and Secret Labs chairs. Any panelist recommendations?
And we got a lot of hands going up on this one. We all care about what we sit in every day, all day long. So Courtney's got to start us off. Courtney?
Well, I'm in a Lazy Boy right now, and I had Lazy Boy Bradford, I think, executive chair. The thing to watch out for, though, it was very comfortable. You know, the Aerons are good. They're a mesh type chair, which are cool in the summer. I like a little more comfortable, something with more padding in it and more support. But be very wary about any of the leather type chairs and I say leather type because they mostly use bonded leather. Unless you get up into $1,000 area for a single chair, it'll be bonded leather. And bonded leather is a way of saying canvas with a tissue-thin layer of compressed cow cells on it, which lasts about 6 months. And especially if you sweat or anything, or if it gets damp, that single tissue-thin layer of leather, which is not really leather, will come flaking off and stick to your clothes. So avoid bonded leather at all costs. Otherwise, I think the Lazy Boys do make good office chairs comfortable. I do have to change them so that they tilt back a little more because my back requires a little more of an angle back.
Harshid.
Yeah, so this is a fun one for me. I've used steel cases, or I have a steel case Amiya right now. Steelcase makes some really good chairs, and depending on the need, they make them in like high performance, this, that, and the other. So for my choice, I think I spent roughly around $800. It's 25% off for the holidays right now, so it is the best time to buy from Steelcase if you are for need of discounts. And they have the Leap, which is good for your back. Maybe if Bill talks a little bit later, he has this Leap. I have the Mia, which for me, it was a better seat cushion, so it gave me more space. It was wide enough. And it still has a backrest, and the armrests come up. They move to the left and right and things. They have another chair called the Jester from Steelcase, which you could even get more creative with how the armrests move. And then some of these chairs do come with headrests and things. But again, I really suggest buy once, cry once. Otherwise, I've seen some companies out in Wisconsin that do like refurbished, or they take a couple chairs and mesh them together, like the Leap and the Mia. So if just depending on the cost, I know that they're expensive out there, about sometimes $1,500 for a chair. But remember our motto: buy once, cry once.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, I remember back in the late 90s when this place I was working for, I was doing a lot of Photoshop work, and they said, we know that you work from home, so you're going to have to get yourself your own ergonomic chair. And it was like $800. I don't remember the brand back then, but it made me realize the importance, because I had a doctor's note and everything. At 21 years old, I was already having back pain. Yoga is huge. And after doing yoga, but that's gone. But for the chair recommendation, Herman Miller Mira. The other thing that I mix it up with, and I swap these things out, is it's called the Turnstone Buoy. And so this thing allows me to get kind of a core workout by moving around, and I swivel around, and it's kind of fun. I've got 3 of these things, so they're a lot of fun to swap out when you get bored of using your Herman Miller, your traditional office chair. So Turnstone Buoy Steelcase ships these out now. You can find them on Amazon for like $2.89.
Alex Lindsay. Oops, you're muted. Zoom muted.
I have a Mira as well, so that's the other. So that is also a it's a great chair. I went through a lot of chairs, and I've had this one now for 3 or 4 years. It's been pretty good.
And I'm on year 29, I think, in my Steelcase Leap chair. I have had the arms replaced once. I have had the seat cushion replaced twice over the course of that. I have had 4 different sets of casters put on it. Over the course of time, depending on what my office space carpeting looked like. The thing that I've loved about it as much as anything was that these products are all available, because these high-end chairs, they knew they were selling into somebody who would keep it for a long time. They built it to last a long time. So the aftermarket is pretty substantial, and you can always find an office supply store in most major cities, or an office furniture store at the high end, who will, when you walk in and say, I have one of these, go, yes, we can work on that, we can fix it, we can do whatever. And that kind of doesn't happen with the come today and gone tomorrow. Oh gosh, why am I not remembering the name of any of the chair sellers? Anyway, next question.
Next question comes in from Pedro G. Gonzalez III from Oklahoma City. What events or activities are in the Washington, D.C. area? Good rental companies? Any tech conventions?
Alex Lindsay, do you know much about the market?
I mean, the person to get really to get in touch with is George Kennedy. He's in our Discord, and he is in D.C., and he's really tied into all of those things. One organization is called District Digital Creatives, and this is all D.C., and they have regular meetings. So that's what you want to look at, districtcreate.org, and George is part of that. But he really has his finger on the pulse of everything that's happening in DC. so if you're looking for a community part of, I'd reach out to George Kennedy.
Great guy too. We miss him on the panel because he hasn't been here in a while. Next question.
Next question comes in via QR code from Las Vegas, Nevada. Chester Sweeney asks the top 5 small devices that can interfere with wireless comms and how to keep them far enough away from productions.
Alex, do you want to dive into this?
I don't know if I can come up with 5, but I can tell you a couple that we look for pretty quickly. phones themselves can, and these are things that generally create problems. So phones, especially older phones, are problematic. Other transmitters are problematic. Motors are problematic. Sometimes, electric motors can put off a lot of EF, and then also microwaves. So we had someone who brought a microwave to the back, behind stage, so they could cook sandwiches and stuff like that while they're working. Turned out to be a disaster. We could hear it everywhere, in all kinds of things. And so those are the four that I can think of. I can't think of a fifth one that's particularly bad, but those are the ones that we look for. Obviously, you have what interacts with comms and also what interacts with audio. High voltage, in general, like a big 400 amp cable running through something oftentimes will put off enough to cause things both in audio cables as well as if it's not perfectly, separated from everything else.
Courtney Gooden?
We don't see them too much anymore, but HMI ballasts from old lighting setups can generate a good amount of RF static. And also if you're shooting on a aircraft carrier or right by an airport, radar can cause
absolutely
all of your and all of your radio mics, and there's nothing you can do to move it further away from you.
Ask me how I know. I was shooting outside of an airport once, and every minute and a half or 2 minutes, my wireless mic signal would go to heck in a handbasket, and I couldn't figure out what, because it was only every 2 minutes, and then I drove out past the radar. Too intermittent, too crazy. Next question.
From St. Paul, Minnesota, Tommy Shantz asked, has anyone had experience with the Zowietek PTZ cameras? Their NDI converters are solid for me, and he has a link to them.
Alex, start us off.
I haven't had experience with them. This is the question, the camera in question. I will say that it for me the real problem is that a lot of times a 1 over 2/3 inch sensor is going to be too small. Like I'm not going to, that's the, I don't really, I have to admit, especially in the environment of this, if you're doing corporate events, which is just not the model that I do personally anymore, but if you're doing corporate events, 2/3 inch chip or 1 inch chip, I think is a solid chip for something you're putting in the back of the room. So some of the Panasonic and Sony long throws, when it gets into less than 25 feet, I do not do anything smaller than Super 35. It just looks so much better, and it's such a much higher quality experience that I'm not really willing to go smaller. I'd rather figure it out than go smaller than that.
Guy.
Yeah, I've been keeping my eye on these, the price point versus the Bird Dogs, because they look very much like the Bird Dog. So a lot of these manufacturers of PTZ optics or PTZ cameras are all in that same factory where they OEM the design. And so basically the software is just theirs. And so the firmware from a PTZ optics might work on a different camera, which is kind of strange, but they're literally manufactured in the same plant. So the price point, though, of these Zowies is blowing my mind, because I have a bunch of the Zowie little boxes for NDI conversion. And the interesting thing about these newer PTZs from Zowie is that they're in NDI HX3. So NDI HX3 is actually very fast. So when people were originally thinking of PTZ cameras with NDI, they were like, hey, there's too much latency. The latency of HX3 is faster than full NDI. So they've ran tests and it's faster. So not only is it more efficient, it's faster. So as far as looks, would you rather have 3 cameras that had bigger sensors, or would you rather have that 4th so you have a safety to always cut to? So it comes down to what is your show, what kind of image do you need, and what kind of lighting is at that venue, because sometimes that's where you do just need to go rent and go get the Panasonics and just get the 150s and they're 15 grand, or 160s or 16 grand. And then you have a gorgeous looking show. And those are the ones that we wind up, or the CRN 500s from Canon are what we wind up using in shows, and they just look, the difference is night and day. And again, this is why going to an NAB, getting to see these kind of cameras on the show floor is really beneficial, because you could see where your dollars are going to be spent on that extra, bit of sensor size that gives you that better look in low lighting conditions.
And in the chat, and our friend in the back end, JJ McKenna, notes that he picked up a Zowie cam and found them highly functional, especially when connecting and distributing back into a Zowie box, and notes they're only about $450, so not hugely expensive if you want, but he apparently really likes them. So that's inner professional thumbs up on them. Next question. Whoops. Courtney, there you go. You found the
My
unmute.
mouse just wouldn't. I clicked. Sorry, couldn't unmute. From Tromsø, Norway, Ronnie Hofse says the Mac Mini with M4 Pro features 3 Thunderbolt 5 ports. What peripheral is able to utilize it?
Alex.
Yeah, I think that in a lot of hubs. So one of the things that you're going to be able to do is the hub. You're going to have you have a lot of throughput with those there. So that gives you the ability to have some very fast hubs that can then support a lot of monitors and other I/O and everything else. So that's one thing. The big thing is drives. So Thunderbolt 5 is dramatically faster than what we had in Thunderbolt 4. So things like OWC and others are building drive systems that can now the drives were capable of going faster. The port wasn't capable of going faster with Thunderbolt 4. So now we're seeing over 5 gigs a second. Gigabytes a second of movement, and that starts to get parity. And I think I've seen numbers up. I haven't seen it personally, but numbers up to 8 gigabytes a second. So an incredible speed that these are capable of. Their theoretical limit, I think, is 80, and then it goes up to 120 gigabits per second. So you could get up to 10 gigabytes a second with the current ones there. But 8 is probably where you're going to get with some of the WoW and Flutter. But I think that that starts to get as fast or faster than the internal drives that we have in our Mac Studios and other things like that. So it's definitely a pretty exciting amount. And this makes a huge difference when you're starting to edit multiple 6K. Like I have stuff that is multiple 6K ISOs that I want to cut and resolve. And I had some issues with proxies, and so I needed to work on them on the original ones, and it only worked on my internal drive on my studio because it was fast enough to play that all back. So this is going to make a big difference for people who want to have a really, really fast online storage for editing things that are uncompressed.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, I'll second the OWC has these Thunderbolt 5 drives that are available for around $600. That's for a 4 terabyte, and they say down here in the specs that it can do 600 megabytes per second. So that's a pretty good amount.
6,000.
Yeah, right. 6 terabytes. That's what I'm to say. 6,000 or 6 terabytes per second, which is pretty fast. But remember, those Thunderbolt 5 ports, you can use almost anything into them because it's backwards compatible with Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 and USB-C. So USB 3.1 as well. So I think you should be able to plug anything in there. Whether you take advantage of that Thunderbolt 5 is what we're talking about.
Next question.
From Brody Hefner in New York City. Did Courtney change any aspect of his video or lighting setup? Most notable improvement I'm seeing today via iPhone is the quality of his video.
Alex, did Courtney not change anything in the new?
I don't think Courtney changed anything.
The new back
we
end?
changed
HDR.
something. So if you're watching, so we are experimenting with a different. So in the last week we were running as all this month and next month, and whenever we get it figured out, we're really experimenting with HDR. So we got 4K working, and now we're experimenting with HDR, and that has a lot to do with us figuring out what our hardware needs to do to get to HDR effectively and how to deliver it. But it also, we're experimenting with things like HDR looks different in live versus VOD on YouTube. Which curves should we use? All those things. And so last week, what you were seeing was PQ, which looks really good on in HDR, but looks a little dark in SDR. We decided to try HLG, which we think right now looks better. We're using the NBC curves, the NBC LUTs, and so now it looks really good on. It looks the best we've seen so far on HDR. So if you're watching on an iPad, an iPhone, an HDR display, that type of thing, you're going to see something that all of us should probably pop out pretty effectively. However, the SDR looks really bright. So if you're watching it right now, you may notice that it's a little bright. And we're working with folks to figure out what that is. And the only way for us to fix it is for us to keep doing it. So that's what we're working on. We are seeing a lot of artifacting. We think the artifacting has to do with the talons. That's an artifact that we've seen in other talons. So at 4K, that may be the issue that we're running into. We're working on that.
Courtney, you were addressed directly. Do you have a?
Nope. Yeah, no, I have. In answer to your question, no, I haven't changed anything. I have my still Canon M50 Mark II as the camera, and I'm still sending up 1080p as all of us are, and that's being formatted and changed to HDR. I don't think I'm sending HDR up from Zoom. That's all being converted on the back end to the format that Alex just outlined, but the stuff I'm sending hasn't changed at all.
I'm glad you all know, though, what's going on, because as Aaron Cody just said in the thing, this is by far the worst Office Hours has ever looked, in my opinion. I must be on SDR today. So if you're getting a less than optimal thing on what you're usually watching, just understand Alex is doing a lot of testing in the back end. Alex, do you want to say something?
Well, I'd say we are doing a lot of testing. I'm not doing any of the testing. I'm just simply saying, let's move forward. So anyway, so Mickey and JJ and others are doing. JJ, by the way, did say just turn up the volume and stand further away from your TV and look better. So anyway, but I think that this is the reason, though, that we decided not to do second hours for the foreseeable future, is because we want to be able to experiment and be able to just plow into it every day and try to, this helps other teams, not just ours, figure out how to make this work. There's not that many people doing it because they turn it on once and it doesn't work, and then they go, oh, I don't want to do it. So
we've reached the top of the hour. We're going to be sneaking away. Thank you all for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with another show, as always. Clock traversal today. Let's see, where are my stats? I'm not seeing any. So, there we go. 42,000 miles, 67,000 kilometers. That's 331 million. Bananas for scale. We will see you tomorrow.
Thanks to all of our incredible questions, our panelists, and the team that makes this work. It's gone through a lot of trouble figuring out the HDR stuff. So we're still working on it. We've got some new encoders. Videon sent us some new ones to test for the SDR for all the other platforms. And so we're working on that as well. So stay tuned.
And thanks to AT&T for pulling the plug on my internet connection for about 20 minutes today.
Ouch.
Or failover comes in handy.
Yeah.
Have two coming in and just it fails over gracefully.
I only have my phone for failover and I can't connect it. I pay by the gig for that. So
Thanks, everybody.